about health at any size or not. And I thought it would be good, especially to speak to you about it because of your medical background, and you obviously know a lot about that because there's a bit of context to it rather than us just talking about we don't have that much knowledge on. So, oh, it's a rave.
We're okay. Sorry, keep going.
And I guess part of that was spurred on by the post or the front cover of Cosmo recently, which showed an overweight woman, and they sort of promoted that as being body acceptance. And I would say, from my point of view, it wasn't about body acceptance. From my point of view anyway, I didn't care what you look like or someone looks like. It's not about that. It's nothing to do with that. It's if that's impacting your health, and if we should be promoting that because it has negative impacts on your health. And from my view, one of the biggest arguments against, or one of the biggest arguments that the health at any size movement use is that you can be overweight and healthy. Now, this is true, but it's so much rarer than what people think. So you're going to be one of the very few people that manage to be overweight and healthy. And you can't really choose if that's you. So yes, you can be more active. So you might, that's going to offset some of the negative effects, but you'd probably still be healthier if you weren't carrying an excessive amount of body fat. The other aspect is actually where you store that body fat. So it's not just the amount of fat you have, but where you store that. And that's largely down to genetics. It's not something that we can really choose where you store. Although, interestingly enough, a lot of women sort of hate their bingo wings or having big thighs or a big bum, but actually it's one of the things that is beneficial to being a woman, store fat in those places, because it reduces our risk of cardiovascular disease and diabetes. That's and have of heart problems, cardiovascular disease. And I guess that's sort of the context of it. But what are your thoughts on the health at any size movement? And I don't know, I feel like it's a bit misportrayed because I don't think it's anything to do with what anyone looks like, or it shouldn't be.
Exactly that. I think people being happy with their body shape in the modern age is rare, and I think that should be promoted. So our social media and marketing causes people to feel like shit a lot of the time because they see these, superposed images of fitness models, photoshopped, perfect lighting after diet. So people feel shit even though they look normal. So that I agree with. I agree with body positivity. I agree with people, promoting that for sure. But as you say, and if that is all that Cosmo are doing, then great. But it's a very, very blurry grey line because it's difficult to differentiate that between saying that is healthy or appropriate. And yeah, exactly as you said, people can be healthy and overweight. However, it doesn't take away from the fact that they are at significantly increased risk of many, many diseases, diabetes, heart disease, strokes, whatever else. On top of that, being large has other issues and implications, which happen regardless. For example, arthritis, just from physically that weight going through the joints, osteoarthritis. Even if you start thinking, if there is a car crash and you need to be extricated from a vehicle, then it's just more difficult. We had a case in A&E where someone had to be brought down the stairs and it took 2 hours instead of 15 minutes. Now, they were in cardiac arrest, so that was a very negative outcome for them. They probably wouldn't have changed if they'd been to the hospital 2 hours earlier, but that's real life. That's what happens. Also anesthetics, airways, that's just significantly more difficult when you're overweight. These are all risks that, it's health at every size, but these are very real. These happen every day. So even if you are 100% healthy, the chances are, if you are carrying a lot of weight, especially in poorer areas, worse areas, then you are at increased risk for things, and there are things which are going to happen. So I think it's kidding yourself if you think it's all dandy, fine and dandy.
Yeah, and I think sometimes the argument, like for and against, it's like, oh well, being really skinny has negative health consequences as well. It's like, yeah, it does.
It does.
And excessively overweight. So, but what about the middle ground? It's like this false dichotomy that, like, oh well, I'm really overweight, but actually being really skinny is also bad. So it's fine that I'm overweight. No, the middle ground is where you want to be, and even you just sort of said it, like, oh, there's this fine line between like body positivity and then if that's a negative effect on your health. Well, I don't actually think it is a fine line. Like, there's a huge space in between where we should all be, where, you know, you're at a fairly healthy weight. And I'd say a healthy weight is quite a big variation there. It's not like it's a very hard thing to hit or stay at. You know, you can carry some excess body fat, have a healthy lifestyle and be really fit, and not have a high risk of cardiovascular disease and diabetes. But if you're obese, you know, the chances are you're going to have quite negative outcomes. And like you were discussing, but like the things that come along with that, it's like uncontrolled blood glucose levels, high cholesterol, lipid levels are different, waist circumference goes up, like all these things predispose you to a pretty grim life later down the line. And it makes it, I think the other thing about cardiovascular disease and obesity is that you won't see these effects straight away. These take years and years to develop, and often, sadly, the first sign of cardiovascular disease is a stroke or a heart attack, and that's pretty far down the line, and that's pretty serious. So even if you're not seeing these symptoms now, I think you've got someone who really likes you. Someone called Katie.
Or you.
Yeah, or me, I mean, well. Yeah, so I guess what we're trying to say is we don't think it's anything about how you look. It's more, well, it isn't about how you look. It's about your health consequences of that. And it's about not just the longevity of your life, but the quality of that life as well. Because yes, the NHS is amazing. Doctors are amazing now. They probably can keep you alive for much longer. But do you want to be in a position where you have to rely on them, where you're in and out of hospital a lot, where you're on medication? Like, that's what your future holds if you don't do something early on.
Yeah, I mean, exactly that. I mean, they're two separate things. Body positivity and, you know, being happy with yourself is one thing, and everyone should have a right to that. But health is another thing, and there's a pretty recognized set of rough parameters as to what constitutes good health: moving a lot, being fit, being within a certain level of body fat, body weight, whatever. I mean, you can't, it doesn't even matter to define it. Like, it doesn't have to be BMI, it doesn't have to be, you know, anything else. It just, you know, there's, as you say, there's extremes, and then there's a big, wide, reasonably okay level in the middle. You know, eating plenty of veg, all this kind of stuff. Like, it's just non-negotiable. It's just obvious. It's just, you can't really argue around it. And yeah, I mean, again, exactly as you say, these are risks that are going to build up down the line. And you know what? You might have 100 people who are massively overweight, and you know, one of them might be fine, might live until they're 130, but 99 of them won't, and 99 of them, or 49 of those, might have perfectly normal blood tests and everything else until they're 50 or 60, and then all of a sudden, you know, game over. And actually, if you look at the numbers, like, our generation is supposed to be living until they're like 100, 120, you know, like, that's what, if we, you know, play our game, you know, play our cards right, we should be living, just by, you know, you look at the life expectancy, it should be going up. Like, having a heart attack at 50 isn't normal, you know. When we get old, dying at 60 or 70 or 80 isn't normal. Like, so yeah, I mean, I think people just need to yeah, to stop kidding themselves. I mean, when I was strong, man, I was BMI of 42, morbidly obese. And I was kidding myself constantly. I was like, no, I'm fit. I'm a strong man. I exercise loads. I do loads and loads of stuff. But I wasn't. I had high blood pressure. I was getting out of breath walking up hills. I had joint pain. I had signs of, the start of diabetes. It was just like, you can ignore it. And I ignored it. And I knew what I was doing. I was a medical student. I was nearly a doctor. And I just ignored it. I was in total denial. And then, I pulled my finger out, sorted it out. And yeah, it's very easy to trick yourself. It's very easy to reassure yourself that there's no problem when there is, for sure.
That you bring up a good point about how long that we could live, but I'm much more interested in like the quality of life, quantity. So it wouldn't, not that I wouldn't care if I died young, but I'd much rather die at I don't know, say a standard age of late 80s, but have a really high quality life until then, than live to, I don't know, 100, but spend the last 10, 20 years of my life in and out of hospital. But I guess to a lesser extent, that's what people are looking at much earlier in life now as well, if they don't take care of themselves.
I mean, the two are related. Like, if you're going to live to 120, then the chance of being in hospital for 30 years before you die is highly, highly unlikely. I mean, without being too brutal or anything, once you start going in and out of hospital regularly, stuff gets difficult very quickly. This is a accumulation of the last 60, 70 years of your lifestyle choices coming to fruition. So things start to stack up pretty quickly, again, without being brutal or morbid or anything like that. So it really is now that you need to start looking after yourself for the end run. And yeah, I mean, as you say, obviously health span is more important than lifespan, but they kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a good point that you kind of touched on is like, yes, you need to start doing things now, but it doesn't need to be like a whole life overheaval. Like, you can start doing really simple things, and if you're in a position where you're overweight, like excessively overweight, and you're not looking after yourself, just doing really basic things like reducing your snacking to 2 snacks a day instead of just continuously eating, or walking instead of taking the car twice a week. These little things can make huge differences. Like, as much as just, I don't know, a 10-minute walk a day. It doesn't need to be one extreme to the other. You don't need to go to the gym every day. You don't ever need to step in a gym. But it's just these small lifestyle changes that can have a huge impact on your health now and your health in the future. We actually have a question. So it's not written that well, but I think it's about, can help the women that are in the menopause and on hormones are making it much harder to lose weight. So basically, how can we women that?
Menopause causes havoc. Menopause causes it to be more difficult. But at the end of the day, calorie balance is king or queen. Calorie balance is the key. So it makes it more difficult. Life's not fair, but you kind of need to work around it. And as Emma said, it's about building habits. Like, if you're doing your walking and you're moving and you're eating healthily, you're controlling your calories, you're controlling your snacks, you're getting your sleep in, stress management, all of that, and you're a little bit overweight, then, it's not the end of the world. But it's not just kind of thinking balls to it, I'm just gonna, I'm not gonna do anything, I don't care, I can be healthy at any size, and menopause makes it more difficult, so it doesn't matter. It's about doing everything you can. And yeah, no, life isn't fair, and hormones do make it more difficult, but it's not an excuse. I mean, it is an excuse, and it's a perfectly valid excuse, but it's not going to help you live as long as you want.
Yeah, I think that one of the things, I guess it's same with genetics, but also some medications that say, a side effect is weight gain. So people are like, oh, well, I'm expected to gain weight, so it's kind of fine. But the fact is, like you were saying, calorie balance still holds true. So the effects that these are having that are causing you to gain weight is either they're making you move less or they're making you eat more. So they're affecting your hunger. And these are completely real. They are real reasons. They will make it harder for you to lose weight, just in the same way that some people's genetics are harder for them to lose weight by affecting these two factors as well. So it's not the fact that this medicine is inherently making you store calories that you haven't taken in. That doesn't happen. Calorie balance will hold true, but it doesn't mean that a very real and strong feeling is making you eat more or want to move less. And that's why it's harder to put on weight. But understanding that and knowing that although yes, it's harder, you can still control that, is something that's very important, I think, because a lot of people see that, oh, actually genetics can make it harder for me to lose weight. It must just be my genetics, I'm going to give up. Or, oh, this medication will make it harder. And again, around the menopause, yes, it will be harder. It doesn't mean it's impossible, and it doesn't mean the same rules don't apply. But again, coming from a coaching perspective or as personal trainers, like, that doesn't mean we should just say, oh, that's an excuse. Like, it's a completely valid excuse. Like, you need a bit more support, and maybe there's different ways that we can support you to do that. And it is genuinely harder. So being a bit empathetic to that is important.
Yeah, and you know what? It's also managing expectations. You know, like, your calorie allowance might be really low. It could be 1,000 calories. It could be 1,200 calories. If you're small, sedentary, and you've got some other, a few other factors against you, then it's just the fact that you can't have cake multiple times a week. And that's just life. I mean, you're not going to affect your weight or height or the fact you're in menopause.
It's easy for you to say it, like BMR of, I don't know, 2,500 and active.
For sure. But you know what? Like, it's true. It's a fact.
Yeah. You're a large man, and that's the way.
I can eat a lot of cake, to be fair. But no. But in all seriousness, like, it's a case of managing expectations, and actually with various coaching tactics, calorie borrowing, managing expectations, not eating when you're not hungry, you can actually get away. I mean, I've worked with a lot of people with a lot of different calorie levels, and you can get away with a lot. And actually, if you are smaller, you're going to be less hungry. So it's just a case of rewiring the expectations of what you can and can't eat, and it's generally fine, or possible, right?
I think a lot of people, when they look at their food choices as well, because as much as there's sort of I know it's popular in the industry to be a bit like, oh, it doesn't matter what you eat as long as you stick to these calories. But if you're on very low calories, it really does matter what you eat in terms of actually being able to stick to your diet. So you might see, I don't know, you might even see yourself like being like, oh, look, I've just had this big burger, it like fits my macros, like, or it fits into my calorie allowance for the day, like, yeah, that's great. And then I don't know, like, say it's even me, I eat about 1,500 calories a day. That is not going to fit my calories, or if it is, it means I can't eat for the rest of the day, or I have to borrow calories from the next day. It's a much bigger effect. Whereas I can make it look like I can eat a huge amount if I make the right food choices. So if I choose like higher volume foods, or, I guess I call it waste calories on foods that aren't giving me a lot. And the more calories that you have, the more you can sort of play around with that and do that a bit. But if you're on quite low calories anyway, you've got to be a bit smarter with what you're eating.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they say, like, it's the first 2 or 3 bites of the food that you taste the most. And after that, you're kind of mindlessly eating it. And a lot of people, however low their calories are, will, as you say, waste a lot of calories on food that they just don't give a shit about. Like, like the bread the stale bread that they bring out at the beginning of a meal in a restaurant. No one enjoys that. No one wants it. They just eat it. And that's a waste. Enjoy the food that you want. Don't eat shit that you don't want to eat.
Yeah, endless sort of snacking as well, or when you're on the go. It's like, I get that sometimes you'll have to eat on the go, but if you can try and prioritize sitting down and being conscious about eating, putting your phone face down or whatever, and just enjoying what you're doing and taking your time with it, you're going to get a lot more sort of satisfaction from that and not feel as hungry after, and actually enjoy that food that you're having.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. We have two other questions I think it's probably worth answering before we wrap up. So Rianne, Francis, have either of you guys had a client that's been obese for most of their life, then as a result link their identity to being a big girl? If so, have you found a way to challenge their limiting beliefs?
What a good question. Yes, I have. And again, it's not as you can just tell people, oh, you know, it's not, it's a bit cliche, but I always say, like, you know, you are not fat, you have fat. And to put it in the context of fat is just some extra energy you've taken in. It is as simple as that. Like, you are carrying a bit more energy than you should. And you need to expend that energy by eating a little bit less, forcing your body to use that as its energy for a while, and then you're going to lose weight. Like, if you take it down to sort of, for me, that helps. I'm like, oh, there's the science of it. Like, that's how my brain works. I'm quite a rational person. I'm like, okay, you've got this extra energy. You've done that because you've eaten a bit too much, but we can change that. And it's as simple as that. And like, there's a positive step, like we can change that. Obviously, that's not going to be like, bam, oh, right, I'm totally free of any of my body, like, image issues, and I don't feel like the big girl anymore. And I kind of get it, you know, if you've always been big, you sort of feel like you always will be big. But it's a limiting belief, and it's that, what do they call it? Something mindset, fixed mindset, where they just, you know, you feel like, oh, this is how I am, and that's how I'm always going to be. So trying to change that, it takes time, but it does, you know, it does work as they start getting results and seeing how their bodies can change. What's your...
I think with this, it's a case because, you know, being obese is a massive psychological, social, whatever sort of thing, identity and whatever else. And, you know, it's taken 20 years or however long to construct, and it'll take a long time to deconstruct. You know, certainly the fat loss for someone who's obese is years. And likewise, the deconstruction of everything else will take similarly long. The way I approach it is just try and pick up on cues and work on them when I do calls with people. I mean, one of the ones that sort of comes to mind is when people say, I love cake, I always love cake, and they keep sort of telling themselves this story that they love cake, or, you know, I'm the person who always loves cake and always eats cake. And I'm like, look, if you keep saying that, you are the person who loves cake. Like, that means every time there's cake, you will be expected by yourself to eat it. And that's just part of the identity. And it's just time to change that, to unravel that, to dismantle it. So anytime you pick up on anything like that, I mean, the thing is that they're changing fundamentally as a person, because, you know, people they associated with before, things they did before would have been, you know, their previous lifestyle. And the fact that they're, you know, fundamentally changing their lifestyle means they're going to start changing who they hang out with, changing, you know, the activities that they do, changing what they spend time doing. So it's just about encouraging, reassuring down that process, because people are like, you know, I'm losing all my friends from before, and it's like, it's not that you're losing them, you're just changing as a person. You know, all these kind of things, these are all tiny little things, but all together form the person's identity. And it's just about guiding them through that process and reassuring them, and you know, picking up on any cues and limiting beliefs, and sort of working on them over time. I mean, there's no point in trying to force anything or use logic. It's just about constantly reinforcing and just building on whatever you find, basically.
Yeah, definitely. And it is a process. And I guess as they start seeing results and as they start believing that they can change, that comes with the sort of the psychological side as well.
I mean, that's hugely complex, to be fair. That's a huge area. And there's some people out there who believe that once you're obese, you can't reverse it. You can't become not obese. I don't believe that, but I mean, it's an interesting one for sure.
What was the other question? I can't see them.
So the last question that I can see was from JC75. Do you think the NHS should fund the care of people who don't follow doctors' advice to lose weight? I mean, that's super, super deep and super, super difficult. The problem is the NHS funds. It's difficult to draw the line as to what they do and don't fund, because people who smoke and don't stop smoking, people who drink alcohol and use drugs and don't stop doing that. Yeah, it's difficult where to draw the line with these lifestyle things. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it is a hard one, and sometimes I look at the NHS and I'm like, oh, if only people took more like responsibility for their own health. And like, I used to work in the hospital, and there was a sticker on the mirror which I really liked, and it said like, you are the person responsible for your health. And you know, that's something that's, and I sometimes think, oh well, if we had to pay for it, surely we would be. But then you look at America, and they have exactly the same problems. You know, it's not the fact that people are like, oh, it doesn't matter, the NHS will pick up the bill. Like, even in America, there's obviously a huge obesity problem, which is, you know, bankrupting people. Like, they have to pay for their healthcare, a lot of them, and yet they'll still take part in activities, you know, or smoking or whatever it might be, that are going to impact their health. So I don't know if not funding it would be of benefit. I mean, it might benefit us in the sense that it wouldn't drain the NHS so much. And I think there should be some kind of, I guess in America it's a bit different because your health insurance goes up, doesn't it, if you're not fit. Like, it would be nice in some ways to have like almost a benefit for healthy people, into like, you know, you sort of, I guess it's a way of like paying less tax the way they do it in America, because your health insurance is less because you actually look after your body, and you, yeah. And I guess if you're spending money looking after your body as well, you know, like gym memberships cost money, and staying fit, eating healthy food, it all costs money as well. So I don't know. That's a huge question, but
I mean,
a lot more to it as well. Like you were saying, I mean, being obese, it's not a choice. Like, people don't choose to be obese. Nobody who's obese, even, you know, even that woman on Cosmo, like, she doesn't want to be obese. And if she does, she shouldn't want to. Like, most people do want to change, even if like they're not ready to yet. So I think it would be, you know, a bit sort of mean to be like, oh, you've not figured out how to lose weight, or it's not worked for you, so we're not gonna help you, and you have to pay for that. Or, you know, there needs to be a lot more support, and we've not nailed it yet, but I don't think that's the answer either.
I mean, the thing is, I mean, what, 80 or 90% of everything that the NHS does is because of people's choices, whether it's heart attack, strokes, diabetes, even down to skiing accidents, rugby accidents. I mean, people are choosing to play rugby, getting whacked in the head, and requiring A&E.
That sort of argument against it's like, right, okay, well, if we're not gonna fund people who don't lose weight, then should we be funding people who go on skiing holidays or who ride a motorcycle? Because we know that increases your risk of ending up in hospital as well. And that's a choice. That could be termed a lifestyle choice. So, like, where do you draw the line? And then, yeah, it's getting a bit blurry. So I think that would be even, I'd probably argue that choosing to go on a skiing holiday, you know, you should probably pay more for that than, again, like being obese. Nobody wants to be. They're probably trying very hard not to be. So yeah, I think that would be a bit of a low blow.
It's a hugely complex area. Like, you can't even, you know what, this is why I left the NHS, because I was just like I'm out. I'm going to do what I can do. To people who want to do this, the NHS is too big of a problem for me to even comprehend, and I don't envy the people trying to solve it.
Yeah, definitely. And it's kind of why I got out of more, I initially wanted to specialize in diabetes and type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease and working with people. There's so many barriers up to that, and actually it's so hard to get through the NHS, like jump through the loopholes, and what, I don't know, there was just, it's also at the end of the day very hard to sell exercise to people who do not like exercise. So there's that. And then, you know, people want this for free, but that's part of the reason it doesn't work. Part of the reason the weight loss advice that doctors give doesn't work is because it is free and there's no buy-in. They're like, oh yeah, my doctor gave me this like pamphlet, or said I could go along to Weight Watchers, you know, for free for 6 weeks or whatever. There's no buy-in for them. Why are you going to turn up? And you're just not going to go. Whereas if you make someone pay the money, I think there should be some kind of thing where, I don't know, you have to pay the £100 to join Weight Watchers for 6 weeks or whatever it is. Hopefully something better than Weight Watchers, but even that's a good start. And if you do it and you lose weight, you get the £100 back. And if you don't, then the £100 stays with the NHS.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know where to start with this. I keep going back and forth in my head and back and forth arguing with people and discussing it. Because the thing is, the problem is there's a huge socioeconomic issue with it all, whereas poor lifestyle choices are often more associated with lower socioeconomic classes, and a lot of people who are rich will pay for private healthcare anyway. And have less health problems. So it's just totally warped. So saying that, you know, people of a lower socioeconomic class have to pay more for health, it just doesn't work. As I said, I don't even know where to go with this.
Yeah, so we've sort of jumped down a rabbit hole here. We'll just answer the ones that are here and then we'll shoot off. Someone says, Gary Mendoza, great guy. He says that there should be more funding for psychological and behavioural change. I totally agree. What are your thoughts? Yes, but who has time for that? You know, like there would need to be a lot more funding. You know, your doctor does not have time to go through behaviour change with you. You know, and as much as I know a lot of people sort of, especially in the fitness industry, are like, oh, doctors don't do this, they don't do that, they don't know anything about nutrition. They've got a whole load of stuff to get through, and you have 10 minutes with them in the GP. Like, they don't have time to do emotional, you know, or motivational interviewing and decide if you're in a stage where you're ready to change. You know, all they really have time to do is tell you that you're at high risk of X, Y, and Z. You need to lose some weight. Here's a few options for you. Please go and try them. They don't, you know, they're not masters in this area. They need to refer out, and I guess the funding isn't there for that.
I mean, there's no chance in hell. Like, I mean, with a lot of my clients, I talk to them every week, plus WhatsApp, and they have paid, so they're at a stage of change where they're very motivated and keen to change. And even then, with this level of contact over many months, sometimes years, it's still difficult. Like, and I mean, I can look after 10, 15 people max. So where is that going to come from in the NHS? Like, that's crazy levels of funding. And you know what, the cost benefit just isn't there for something like the NHS, where they just look at, right, if we give 100 people gastric bands, it costs this much money, and these are the results, and this is how much it saves, versus if we do an education program, this is the results, and this is how much it costs, and all that. It just doesn't add up to do education, unfortunately, even though that is correct.
They have to have that motivation already.
Yeah, they do, for sure.
You, like, I want to change. That has to be there. They're not going to come along to a motivational interviewing session, you know, even if it was funded and it was free. In fact, they're probably less likely if it's free.
For sure.
There's no buy-in for it, and they don't, even if it was done by, you know, maybe even if Gary put it on and he's very good at what he does, they don't respect that. They don't know who he is. They don't really care what he's got to say. So, and they've not paid to be there. So one, they probably won't turn up, and two, they won't take on what's being said anyway, or a lot of them won't. We'll wrap that up for tonight.